focus now on a different verse. And this is the verse from chapter 4, verse 8. That the background to this verse is that there was, so basically Elimelech's fields after he died were able to be inherited by somebody who would redeem his fields by marrying his wife. But his wife was not capable of having a child, so whoever would marry his wife's surrogate, in this case Ruth, would be able to inherit the fields of Elimelech. So Boaz had agreed to marry Ruth, but this was complicated because Ruth was a Moabite, and also her husband had died, and so not everybody, it wasn't clear that it was kosher to marry a Moabite woman, so it was complicated. It was complicated. So he had to get permission from a closer relative, a closer redeemer. So he said, Boaz said in chapter 4, verse 5, you have to, if you want to get the fields of Nami, you have to marry Ruth. And the redeemer said, I don't want to do that. The other person, the relative, said, I can't do it. I can't redeem it for myself. I don't want to destroy my inheritance. You redeem it, because I can't redeem. Because he says, I'm not marrying this Moabite woman. I'm not doing it. And then it says in verse 7, V'zot lefanim b'Yisrael. This is the very interesting verse. This is what used to be done in Israel. Ala gu'ula v'ala t'mura. For the redemption and for the exchange. Meaning to say, if you want to legally acquire something, l'kayim kol davar, you want to legally transact something. Today, if you want to make a legal transaction, you sign a document, you do a handshake. Handshake's maybe not legally binding, I don't know, but signed document you have it notarized. But in those days, what did you do? Shalaf ishnalo. You removed your shoe. You removed your shoe and gave it to your friend. V'zot ha'tudah b'Yisrael. And that was the process of ratification. That was the ratification in Israel. So what's the concept here of the removal of the shoe? So it says in verse 8, Vayomer Goel Boaz Kinelach Vayishlof Na'aro. So the Redeemer says to Boaz, you acquire it, and he removed his shoe. So that's what Boaz did. He removed his shoe. What is this concept? First of all, actually, who removed whose shoe? Did Boaz remove his own shoe, or did the person, the putative Redeemer, remove his shoe? Who removed his shoe? The Talmud actually, or the Midrash actually has a debate. Who removed the shoe? Was it the Boaz, or was it the Redeemer? So Rav and Levi actually argued about this, that one of them said it was Boaz's shoe, and one of them says it was the Redeemer's shoe. So the Midrash concludes that it was probably Boaz's shoe, because typically speaking, the purchaser is the one who gives something to the part being purchased. I was thinking, where else do we see removal of the shoe? Where else do we see a removal of a shoe? In the very good. Aviva is exact. Aviva tells us that one answer. Excellent. Excellent, Aviva. That in the process, I was thinking of three cases of where we have a removal of a shoe. One is in the process of Yevamos, that if you want to, that you have a responsibility to marry the if a man dies without any children and he leaves behind his widow, his brother has the responsibility to do yibum, to marry, to do levirate marriage, and to marry his brother's wife. But if he didn't want to, and today we don't allow him to anymore, today he does chalitza, in which case she removes the shoe. She removes his shoe and spits on the ground. So it's the removal of the shoe. So that's one concept. There's the significance of the removal of the shoe. Another case, where else do we see removal of the shoe? Anybody remember? Or something else where we say a removal of the shoe? So another case where we have the removal of the shoe is by Moshe Rabbeinu. God says to Moshe, remove your shoe because you're standing on hallowed ground. You're supposed to remove your shoes. Also, in the Islamic world, when you pray, you remove your shoes. Here, it seems to be that it was probably because the shoes had dirt on them. And so therefore, when you're going to be praying, you're not supposed to be bringing the dirt, the muddy boots into the sacred space. So there is the shoe represented something that was dirty. But we also know that the Kohanim, when they went up to give the priestly blessing, they are supposed to remove their shoes when they give the priestly blessing. There it's because maybe the Talmud says maybe their strap will break, and then they'll take off their strap in the middle, and they'll be leaving the priestly blessing in the middle. But also on the Temple Mount, you're not allowed to wear your shoes. If anybody visits Israel nowadays and you want to go on the Temple Mount, you're allowed to go. It's complicated politically, but you're certainly allowed to go. But you're not allowed to wear shoes. So you have to walk without shoes on the Temple Mount. That's a requirement. And so this is how they used to do the acquisition. They used to do it with a shoe. What's the significance of acquiring something with a shoe? I'm not 100% sure, but I want to tell you that there's a story that I saw about this. This is the story it has to do with Reb Shalom of Belz, and then I'll tell you my own story about this, okay? So the story is that there was once a wealthy chassid who came for Shavuos to Belz to spend the holiday with his Rebbe, So he met, while he was there in Belz, he met a friend of his who was so poor that his shoes were torn. So this wealthy chassid took off his shoes and gave them to his friend, and he put on the torn pair. So when the son of the Belz Rebbe at that time heard this, and the name was Rabbi Sachar Dov of Belz, he said the following. He says, this is the idea behind this verse that we just read. V'zot lefanim b'Yisrael al gulav al tmura. Shalaf ish na'alo v'natan l're'eo. This was the custom in the ancient days about redemption and exchange, that a man removed his shoe and gave it to his friend. But the tzaddik, so that was the way they used to conduct business. Today, by the way, there is a hint to this when we do what's called a kinyan sudar. When we do a transaction, you give your handkerchief and the other person picks it up. You give your keys, your iPhone. This is the source, the Talmud says, for this kind of a kinyan, of a transaction, of an acquisition, that maybe like in legal terms, like a check that you give to somebody else to acquire something. But the tzaddik of Belz said, what does geula and temura mean? He says that when it comes to charity, we find the following statements. First, we say, charity is so great because it brings about redemption. Great is charity, for it brings the redemption near. And secondly, we say, charity is a circle that turns around and around. Today you're giving charity, tomorrow you need charity. Today this person is poor and the other rich, and tomorrow they'll exchange places. So therefore, the verse states that Zotafanim Yisrael al Geula val Tamura. Charity is Geula, redemption. You give charity, you'll be redeemed. And Tamura, that it's an indication of the cycle of the world. Just 1 second, Guy, and we'll come to your point in a moment. But the idea is that these are the reasons for charity. These are the reasons for charity not the reasons for charity, but these are concepts related to charity. It brings about redemption and also reminds us of the cycle of the world, that today you give charity, tomorrow you'll need charity, or today you need and tomorrow you'll give. And a very, very brief story. One time I went to Cuba, I met this very poor Jew there. He had no food, no money. So I gave him some money. I gave him some food that I had with me. And then I said, you know what? You want my shoes? And he looks at my shoes and he goes, no, I'm good. He didn't like my shoes. He didn't want my shoes. He thought my shoes were, he was okay with his shoes. All right, Guy, yes, please.